It is the night of May 31st, 1921, and the air above Greenwood shudders with the roar of gunfire and the crack of breaking windows. The once bright streets of what was called Black Wall Street become a battlefield, and a single photograph taken from a balcony captures a plume of black smoke rising from a storefront, as if the district itself were breathing fire. Why did a thriving African-American community, home to doctors, lawyers, and entrepreneurs, dissolve in a single afternoon, and how did the truth of that devastation stay hidden for more than half a century? The story begins in the spring of 1921, when Tulsa, Oklahoma, was a booming oil town. The city's downtown glittered with new skyscrapers, but a short drive north lay Greenwood, a neighborhood that had earned a reputation for wealth and self-sufficiency. Families saved for college, merchants displayed polished mahogany fixtures, and the streets echoed with the laughter of children playing beside freshly paved sidewalks. Yet beneath that prosperity simmered racial tension, stoked by a national surge of white supremacist groups and local political maneuvering. On May 30th, a young black teenager named Dick Rowland was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator in a downtown building. The accusation, later shown to be unfounded, sparked an angry mob of white residents who gathered outside the courthouse where Rowland was being held. Black veterans, many of whom had fought in World War I, organized a protective detail, forming a line of armed men to shield the courthouse. The tension was palpable, like a coiled spring waiting for a spark. At dawn on May 31st, a white mob, some reports describe them as a crowd of a few thousand, stormed the courthouse, clashed with the black defenders, and retreated only to regroup on the north side of the Arkansas River. From there they marched into Greenwood, and the massacre began. Armed with rifles, shotguns, and even private citizens' pistols, the mob set fire to homes and businesses. Eyewitnesses later recounted how the flames seemed to leap from one building to the next, fed by wooden shingle roofs and the dry summer air. The National Guard was eventually called in, but by then the inferno had already turned the heart of the district into a charred wasteland. Estimates of the death toll vary. Contemporary newspaper accounts listed dozens, while later investigations suggest the number could be in the hundreds. The official death count recorded by the city was 36, but the lack of thorough documentation and the deliberate suppression of records make the true figure impossible to confirm. Over 1,000 homes were destroyed, and the economic loss was estimated in the tens of millions of dollars, a staggering sum for the era. In the immediate aftermath, the city's leadership ordered the burial of the victims in a mass grave at an unmarked cemetery. Survivors were forced to sign away claims for compensation, and the story of the massacre was quietly erased from local histories. Newspapers across the nation either downplayed the event or omitted it entirely. For decades, the phrase Tulsa Race Riot appeared in official reports, a euphemism that softened the brutality of the assault. The veil of silence began to lift only after the civil rights movement of the 1960s sparked a renewed interest in forgotten injustices. In the early 1970s, a handful of survivors, now elderly, started to speak publicly, sharing their memories with journalists and historians. Their testimonies sparked a modest wave of newspaper articles, but the core of the evidence, photographs, court documents, and police reports, remained locked away in the city's municipal archives. The turning point arrived in the early 1990s, when a graduate student researching urban violence stumbled upon a reference to a sealed box of records in the Tulsa County Courthouse. The box, according to a footnote, contained the original police reports, eyewitness statements, and a collection of photographs taken by a local newspaper photographer who had been on the scene. The student filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and after years of bureaucratic delay, the city finally released the documents in 1996. What the newly opened files revealed was both harrowing and transformative. Among the papers were detailed maps of the city's fire response routes, showing that fire trucks were deliberately diverted away from Greenwood. A series of telegrams from the state's governor's office indicated that the National Guard had been instructed to protect private property belonging to white businessmen, while allowing the destruction of black-owned structures to continue unchecked. Perhaps most striking were the photographs, over 100 black and white images that captured the night's chaos, the faces of terrified residents, and the systematic looting of stores that had been the pride of the community. The release of these archives forced historians to re-evaluate the accepted narrative. The massacre was no longer a spontaneous riot, it was a coordinated attack, facilitated by local authorities. The new evidence also exposed the scale of the cover-up. City officials had classified the photographs as sensitive and stored them in a vault that was never mentioned in public records. The documents remained sealed for 75 years, effectively erasing the visual memory of the atrocity from public consciousness. As scholars dug deeper, another shocking layer emerged. A set of insurance claim forms, long thought lost, showed that many black business owners had filed for compensation that was never processed. The forms bore signatures of city clerks who, according to later testimony, had been instructed to mark them as incomplete and return them to the filing cabinet. This bureaucratic sabotage meant that, even after the physical destruction, the economic ruin of Greenwood was cemented by a deliberate denial of restitution. The story of the hidden archives reverberates today. In 2020, amid a national reckoning with racial injustice, the Tulsa Historical Society partnered with local activists to digitize the released photographs and make them publicly accessible. The images have been displayed in museums, used in school curricula, and sparked renewed calls for reparations. Yet the question remains, how many other chapters of American history remain locked away, waiting for a determined researcher to pry open a dusty box? The legacy of the Tulsa Massacre is a reminder that history is not only what happened, but also what is remembered, and what is deliberately forgotten. The sealed archives, once a symbol of silence, now serve as a stark illustration of how evidence can reshape collective memory. As the city rebuilds and commemorates the lost community, the unanswered question lingers in the minds of scholars and citizens alike: if the truth can be hidden for decades, what other truths are still waiting in the shadows of forgotten vaults?